Dr. Jai-Ho Park pressed his hand against the thick glass window of Mars Base One's medical bay. The red landscape stretched endlessly before him, beautiful but deadly. He had been on Mars for 3 months now, serving as the chief medical officer for humanity's first permanent Mars settlement, but the view still took his breath away. His moment of peace was interrupted by a soft beep from his tablet. The latest bone density scan results from the colonists had arrived, and they weren't good. Ji-Ho frowned as he studied the numbers. The colonists were losing bone mass faster than anyone had predicted on Earth. "Dr. Park," a voice called from the corridor. Soo-Min Lee, one of the base engineers, rushed into the medical bay. Her usually neat uniform was stained with dirt from the hydroponic gardens. "We have a problem in Section 3. You need to see this." Jai-Ho grabbed his medical kit and followed Soo-Min through the station's white corridors. The hydroponics bay was the heart of their survival on Mars. Without it, they would have no fresh food. As they entered, Jai-Ho noticed an unusual smell. "Look at this," Soo-Min said, pointing to one of the tomato plants. Strange, dark spots covered its leaves. Under the powerful LED growing lights, Jai-Ho could see something even more worrying. Tiny patches of an unknown growth spreading across the soil. "Have you seen anything like this before?" Soo-Min asked, her voice tight with worry. Jai-Ho shook his head slowly. "Not exactly, but I need to take samples right away." He pulled out collection tubes from his kit and carefully gathered specimens of both the plant damage and the soil growth. This was exactly the kind of unexpected problem he had feared might develop in Mars' unique environment. Back in his lab, Jai-Ho stared through his microscope at the samples. What he saw made him sit back in surprise. The microscope's screen showed bacteria, but they were behaving strangely, growing and changing in ways he had never seen before. He was still studying the samples when Dr. Ha-Won Kim, the base's reproductive health specialist, entered the lab. "Jai-Ho, do you have a minute? We need to discuss the latest health reports." "The bone density loss?" he asked, looking up from his work. "Yes," she replied, setting down her own tablet. "It's happening about 30% faster than our Earth-based models predicted. If this continues, we could see serious problems within a year." Jai-Ho ran his hands through his hair, a habit when he was stressed. They had 100 people to keep healthy on Mars, and the challenges were already piling up. The strange bacteria in the hydroponics bay, the accelerated bone loss, and they were only 3 months into the mission. "We need to modify the exercise protocols," he said finally. "Double the time in the artificial gravity chambers. And I want daily calcium supplements for everyone, not just weekly." Ha-Won nodded in agreement, but then gestured to his microscope. "What's that you're working on?" Jai-Ho explained about the hydroponics situation. As he talked, Ha-Won's expression grew more concerned. "If something affects our food supply," she began. "I know," Jai-Ho said quietly. "We're 100 million kilometers from Earth. We have to solve these problems ourselves." Just then, his tablet lit up with another alert. 3 more colonists had reported feeling dizzy and weak. Ji-Ho looked out the window again at the red Martian landscape. The dust storms were getting stronger, and somewhere in that swirling red cloud, invisible bacteria were evolving in ways they hadn't anticipated. "Mars is testing us," he said to Ha-Won, "and we're just beginning to understand how hard these tests will be." As if in response, the wind outside grew stronger, and red dust swirled against the windows of Mars Base 1. The future of human survival on Mars rested in their hands, and failure was not an option. Dr. Ha-Won Kim sat in her office, staring at the medical results on her screen. She read them 3 times to be sure. The pregnancy test was positive. The first human pregnancy on Mars was now a reality. The news both excited and worried her. As the reproductive health specialist for Mars Base 1, she had prepared for this possibility. But all her preparation had been theoretical. Now, a real human life would develop in Mars' low-gravity environment. She pressed the communication button on her desk. "Dr. Park, Could you come to my office? It's important. Jai-ho arrived quickly, looking tired. The problems with the hydroponic gardens were still ongoing, and no one had slept well in days. What is it, Ha-won? We have our first Mars pregnancy, she said simply, turning her screen so he could see the results. Technician Mai Sun-yoon. 6 weeks along. Jai-ho sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. Have you told her yet? No. I wanted to discuss it with you first. We need a plan. They both knew the risks. No human had ever been born in 1/3 Earth's gravity. The development of bones, muscles, and organs might all be affected. Even the shape of the baby's skull might be different. The Earth Committee will want us to send her back, Jai-ho said, referring to the group of scientists who supervise their mission from Earth. Ha-won nodded. The next return ship isn't due for 8 months. By then, she'll be too far along to travel safely. Then we handle it here, Jai-ho decided. We knew this would happen eventually. The whole point of this mission is to prove humans can truly live on Mars, not just visit. They called Mai Sun to the medical bay. She arrived with her husband, engineer Do Jin-yoon. They had been among the first couples selected for the Mars mission, chosen partly because they both wanted children. The test is positive, Ha-won told them gently. You're going to have the first Mars baby. My son's hands went to her stomach. Is it safe? She asked. Can the baby develop normally here? We don't know for certain, Ha-won answered honestly. But we have plans in place. We'll monitor every stage of development carefully. You'll spend 4 hours each day in the artificial gravity chamber. We've developed special exercises to help the baby develop properly. Do Jin held his wife's hand tightly. What about radiation? Your living quarters will be moved to the most heavily shielded section of the base, Jai-ho explained. We've also developed new protective clothing for my son to wear when she moves around the base. As they discussed the details, Ha-won noticed something interesting. Despite the risks, despite the unknowns, there was hope and excitement in the room. This baby would be something new in human history, the first child of 2 worlds. Later that evening, after sending her report to Earth, Ha-won stood at the observation window with Jai-ho. The sun was setting, turning the Martian sky a deep purple. Earth Command won't be happy, she said. No, Jai-ho agreed. But they can't stop what's already happening. Life finds a way, even on Mars. We'll need to modify all our medical equipment for infant care, Ha-won said, already making plans. Design new testing protocols. Find ways to measure development that take Mars gravity into account. The whole base will help, Jai-ho assured her. This baby belongs to all of us now. As they watched the Martian night fall, Ha-won thought about the changes coming to their small community. They weren't just a scientific mission anymore. They were becoming something else, the first human settlement to welcome new life on another world. The challenges ahead were enormous, but so was the hope this pregnancy represented. Whatever happened, human history had taken a new turn on the red planet. Engineer Soo-min Lee crawled through the maintenance tunnel of Mars Base 1, her headlamp illuminating the metal walls around her. The radiation sensors had been showing unusual readings in this section, and she needed to find out why. As she moved forward, her scanner beeped steadily, growing louder as she approached the outer wall. How's it looking? Do Jin's voice came through her radio. Her fellow engineer was monitoring her progress from the control room. Not good, Soo-min replied, studying the scanner's display. The radiation levels are higher than they should be. She pressed her gloved hand against the wall, feeling for irregularities in the metal. Then she saw it. Under the bright beam of her headlamp, a network of tiny cracks spread across the radiation shielding. They were small, almost invisible to the naked eye, but they were there. Soo-min's heart beat faster as she realized what this meant. Do Jin, we have microfractures in Section 7, she reported. The shielding is compromised. Alert Dr. Park immediately. Within an hour, the base's emergency team gathered in the main control room. Su-min displayed the scanner data on the large screen while Jai-ho and Hao-won looked on with concern. "The microfractures are spreading," Su-min explained, pointing to the damaged areas. "The daily temperature changes between day and night are causing the metal to expand and contract. Our Earth-made materials aren't handling Mars conditions as well as we expected." "What about the pregnant women's quarters?" Hao-won asked. "My son was now 3 months along, and 2 other women had recently announced their pregnancies. They're in Section 4, which is still secure," Su-min assured her. "But we need to address this problem before it spreads." Jai-ho stepped closer to the screen. "How long do we have?" "At the current rate of deterioration, maybe 3 months before the radiation levels become dangerous in the affected sections," Su-min answered. "We need to develop new materials that can handle the temperature changes better." The room fell silent. They all knew that supply ships from Earth wouldn't arrive for another 6 months. They would have to solve this problem themselves. "I have an idea," Su-min said, pulling up another file on her tablet. "We've been studying the local Martian rocks. Some contain high levels of radiation-blocking minerals. If we can develop a way to process these rocks and combine them with our existing materials." Over the next few weeks, Su-min and her engineering team worked tirelessly. They set up a small processing facility to extract minerals from Martian rocks. They tested different combinations of materials, looking for the perfect blend that could withstand both radiation and temperature changes. The work was difficult, and there were many failures, but they couldn't give up. The lives of everyone in the base, including their unborn children, depended on their success. One evening, as Su-min was running final tests on their latest prototype, she noticed something unexpected. The new material wasn't just blocking radiation. It was actually getting stronger over time as it reacted with the Martian atmosphere. "Look at this," she called to Do-jin, who was working nearby. "The molecular bonds are adapting to the environment. It's like the material is learning from Mars." This discovery changed everything. Within days, they began producing panels of the new material. As they replaced the damaged sections of the base, Su-min realized something important. They weren't just fixing a problem. They were learning to work with Mars instead of fighting against it. That night, looking out at the red planet's surface, Su-min thought about how they were all adapting, just like her new material. Perhaps that was the key to survival on Mars. Not trying to make it like Earth, but learning to become something new. Dr. Jai-ho Park stood outside the medical bay's quarantine room, watching through the observation window as Dr. Hao-won Kim prepared Mai Sun-yoon for the first human birth on Mars. The mother-to-be lay on the specially designed birthing chair, her husband Do-jin holding her hand. Everything had to be perfect. They would only get one chance at this historic moment. "How are her vital signs?" Jai-ho asked through the intercom. "Heart rate elevated but stable," Hao-won responded, checking the monitors. "The baby is showing strong signs of movement." Dr. Young Mi-cho, the base's psychiatrist, stood beside Jai-ho. She had been monitoring the mental health of all colonists, but particularly the expectant mothers. "My son's anxiety levels are surprisingly low," she noted. "She's handling this remarkably well." The labor progressed steadily over the next few hours. The medical team had trained for every possible complication, but they still worried about how the low gravity might affect the birth process. They had positioned gravity generators around the birthing chair to create conditions closer to Earth's gravity, but they couldn't perfectly replicate it. Suddenly, my son's vital signs began to fluctuate. "Blood pressure dropping," Hao-won called out. "The baby's heart rate is increasing." Jai-ho quickly suited up in sterile gear and entered the room. The baby was coming, but something wasn't right. The monitors showed the umbilical cord had wrapped around the baby's neck, a dangerous situation even on Earth. "We need to perform an emergency procedure," Jai-ho announced calmly. "My son, we're going to help you deliver the baby right now." The next few minutes were intense. Jai-ho and Hao-won worked together with practiced precision, their movements careful in the artificial gravity field. Finally, A cry broke through the tense silence, the first human cry ever heard on Mars. "It's a girl," HFY announced, her voice full of emotion. "And she's perfectly healthy." As the medical team examined the baby, young May noticed something remarkable on the monitors. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen showing the base's vital signs. All across Mars Base 1, people had stopped what they were doing. Heart rates and stress indicators were elevated. Everyone had been anxiously waiting for news. Using the base-wide communication system, HFY made the announcement. At 1547 Mars Standard Time, Jae-yun became the first human born on another planet. Mother and daughter are doing well. The response was immediate. The monitors showed a wave of positive emotional indicators spreading through the base. Young Miss smiled as she watched the data. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. "The colonists have been showing increasing signs of depression and isolation. This birth, it gives everyone hope." Later that evening, after all the medical checks were complete, Jae-ho and Young Mei stood at their usual spot by the observation window. The baby was sleeping peacefully in the medical bay's nursery, specially shielded against radiation using Sumin's new materials. "She's already different from Earth babies," Jae-ho observed. "Her muscle tone, her bone density. They're adapted for Mars gravity. She's the first of a new kind of human." Young Mi nodded thoughtfully. "The psychological impact of this birth goes beyond just lifting spirits. It makes Mars feel like home. People are already talking about the future. Schools, playgrounds, a real community." As they watched the Martian sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jae-ho thought about how far they had come. They weren't just surviving on Mars anymore. They were beginning to truly live here. And now, with Jae-yun's birth, they had proven that humanity could do more than just visit other worlds. They could make them home. Dr. Du-Yun Kang watched the weather sensors with growing concern. The dust storm approaching Mars Base 1 was larger than any they had seen before. As the environmental systems specialist, he knew their solar panels couldn't handle much more dust coverage. "How long until it hits?" Su-min asked, standing beside him at the control room's main screen. The satellite image showed a massive red cloud moving toward them. 3 hours, Du-Yun replied. "Maybe less. This one's moving fast." He turned to face the room full of worried colonists. "We need to clean and seal all external systems now." Teams of workers rushed to prepare the base. They had practiced for dust storms, but this one was different. The wind speeds were nearly double what they had trained for. Outside, the sky was turning from pale pink to angry red. In the medical bay, Jae-ho and HFY worked quickly to move their equipment to backup power. Baby Jae-yun, now 3 months old, slept peacefully in her specially shielded crib, unaware of the coming storm. "The backup generators will last 48 hours, Su-min reported, checking their power systems. "After that, we'll need at least some sunlight reaching the solar panels." Du-Yun nodded, his eyes fixed on the approaching storm. He had studied Martian weather patterns for years, but something about this storm felt wrong. The dust particles were behaving strangely, clustering together in ways their models hadn't predicted. The storm hit with tremendous force. The base's outer walls creaked under the assault of wind and dust. Red darkness fell outside their windows as thick dust blocked out the sun. The solar power readings dropped rapidly. "Power at 60%, Su-min announced. 50%, 40%. Du-Yun moved from station to station, adjusting systems to conserve energy. They had to keep the critical areas running: life support, the medical bay, and the radiation shielding. Everything else would have to be shut down. Then he noticed something odd in the environmental readings. The dust wasn't just blocking their solar panels, it was changing them. Under his microscope, he could see the dust particles forming patterns, almost like living things. "Dr. Park," he called over the intercom. "I need you to see this." Jae-ho arrived quickly, and Du-Yun showed him the microscope images. The dust particles are bonding with the bacteria we found in the hydroponics bay, he explained. They're creating new structures. Could this help us? Jai-ho asked, studying the images. Maybe, Du-yun replied. If we can understand how these particles work together, we might be able to create better solar panels, ones that can actually use the dust instead of being blocked by it. As the storm raged on, the base's scientists worked together, studying this new discovery. The dust that threatened to destroy their power supply might hold the key to their survival. By the third day, when the storm finally began to clear, they had developed a prototype. The new solar panel coating used the Martian dust to enhance power collection instead of blocking it. Standing at the observation window, watching the first rays of sunlight break through the dusty sky, Du-yun realized something important. Mars wasn't just challenging them, it was teaching them. Every problem the planet threw at them forced them to adapt and grow stronger. The storm's passing, he announced to the gathered colonists. But we're staying. And next time, we'll be ready. Dr. Jai-ho Park and researcher Min-seo Choi stood in the genetics lab, examining blood samples from baby Jai-yun. At 6 months old, the first Mars-born human was developing differently than Earth babies. Her bones were stronger than expected, and her blood showed unusual changes. Look at these cell structures, Min-seo said, pointing to the screen. Her body is already adapting to Mars conditions. The genetic changes are happening faster than we predicted. Jai-ho studied the data carefully. As the base's chief medical officer, he needed to make an important decision. Should they help this natural adaptation process, or try to keep Mars-born children as close to Earth normal as possible? What about the other pregnant women? He asked. 5 more women were now expecting babies on Mars. Min-seo brought up more files on her screen. Their unborn babies are showing similar changes. It seems Mars is changing us, whether we want it to or not. They called a meeting with the other medical staff. Hai-won and Young-mi joined them in the conference room, along with Du-yun, who had been studying the environmental effects on human biology. We need to make a choice, Jai-ho explained to the group. We can try to prevent these adaptations, or we can help them happen in a safe, controlled way. If we fight the changes, we risk making our children weaker, Hai-won said. They need to be strong enough for the world they live in. Young-mi nodded in agreement. The children born here will never think of Earth as home. Their bodies should match their environment. Min-seo presented her research. She had developed a way to guide the genetic adaptations that were already happening naturally. The process would help Mars-born children develop stronger bones, more efficient oxygen use, and better radiation resistance. Is it safe? Jai-ho asked, thinking of all the families who trusted them with their children's futures. We've tested it thoroughly, Min-seo assured him. The changes work with the natural adaptations we're already seeing. We're just helping the process happen more smoothly. The team discussed the plan for hours. They knew this decision would affect not just the current Mars babies, but all future generations born on the Red Planet. Finally, Jai-ho made his decision. We'll start the adaptation protocol, but we'll monitor everything carefully. Each family can choose whether to participate. To their surprise, every expecting family chose to join the program. The colonists understood that their children needed to be ready for life on Mars. Over the next few months, they watched the results carefully. The unborn babies developed normally, but with subtle improvements in their physical structure. Their bones grew denser, their blood carried oxygen more efficiently, and their cells showed better radiation resistance. One evening, as Jai-ho watched Jai-yun playing in the nursery, he noticed how naturally she moved in Mars' low gravity. She would never struggle with it the way Earth-born humans did. We're not just colonizing Mars, he said to Min-seo, who had joined him at the window. Mars is changing us, making us into something new, something stronger. Min-seo smiled as she watched the child. This is how humanity will reach the stars, she said, not by staying the same, but by adapting to each new world we find. Dr. Ha-won Kim watched 9-month-old Jai-yun crawl efficiently across the nursery floor. The child moved with a grace that Earth-born humans could never match in Mars gravity. 4 other Mars-born babies now shared the nursery, each showing similar adaptations to their home world. The door opened, and Jiho entered with a serious expression. Earth Command sent their response, he said quietly. They want us to stop the adaptation protocol immediately. Ha-1 straightened up, her face showing concern. They can't expect us to ignore what's best for our children. They're worried about the changes becoming permanent, Jiho explained. They think we're creating a separate species of humans. The communication screen in the nursery lit up, showing an incoming call from Earth. Dr. Marcus Chen, head of the Earth Oversight Committee, appeared on screen. His expression was stern. Dr. Park, Dr. Kim, he began formally. The committee has reviewed your latest medical reports. The genetic modifications you're allowing go far beyond your mission parameters. We're ordering you to stop all genetic adaptation procedures immediately. Jiho stepped forward. With respect, Dr. Chen, these aren't just modifications we're making. These are natural adaptations. Our children's bodies are changing to survive here. That's precisely what concerns us, Dr. Chen replied. If these changes continue, Mars colonists may become too different from Earth humans. We cannot allow that to happen. As they argued, Ha-1 noticed something interesting in the nursery. The Martian soil samples they had been studying had developed new bacterial colonies. Under her microscope, she could see these bacteria were helping plants grow stronger in the harsh Martian environment. Dr. Chen, she interrupted, bringing her discovery to the screen. Look at this. It's not just humans adapting to Mars. Everything here is evolving together. The bacteria, the plants, the children. We're becoming part of Mars' ecosystem. The Earth scientist studied the images with growing interest. This is remarkable data, he admitted, but it doesn't change the committee's decision. We're sending a ship to evaluate the situation. If necessary, we'll shut down the colony. After the call ended, Jiho and Ha-1 gathered with other colony leaders. The mood was tense but determined. Earth doesn't understand, Su-min said, speaking for many. We're not trying to become different. We're trying to survive. Du-Yun added, our children are healthy and strong. The adaptation protocol is working. We can't go backward now. As they discussed their options, Ji-Yun and the other Mars babies played nearby, their laughter echoing through the base. These children had never known Earth's gravity. They were truly children of Mars. Ha-1 looked at her colleagues. Maybe the real question isn't whether we're becoming too different from Earth, she said. Maybe it's whether we're becoming exactly what we need to be. Jiho nodded slowly. We'll show Earth that these changes aren't a danger. They're the next step in human evolution. We're not losing our humanity. We're expanding it to reach new worlds. As night fell on Mars, the colony's lights glowed steadily in the darkness. Tomorrow they would begin preparing their defense of the adaptation protocol. They would show Earth that humanity's future lay not in staying the same, but in growing strong enough to embrace new worlds. 5 years had passed since the first humans arrived at Mars Base 1. The morning sun cast a pale red light through the dome of the main garden chamber, where Dr. Jiho Park watched children playing among the thriving plants. 7 Mars-born children now called the base home, with 3 more on the way. Today was important. The Earth Oversight Committee's evaluation team would arrive to decide the colony's future. Their ship had already entered Mars orbit. The hydroponics are ready for inspection, Su-min reported, joining Jiho at the garden dome. The plants grew strong and healthy, thanks to their partnership with the adapted Martian bacteria. Even Earth's experts can't argue with these results. In the medical bay, Ha-1 and Min-seo prepared their research data. 5 years of careful documentation showed how the Mars-born children had developed. They were healthy, strong, and completely adapted to their environment. Their bones were dense enough for Mars gravity, but light enough to let them move with remarkable speed and grace. Look at this, Min-seo said, pointing to her latest results. The children's bodies process oxygen 30% more efficiently than Earth humans, and their radiation resistance continues to improve with each generation. Do-Yun hurried into the medical bay. "The Earth ship is beginning its landing sequence," he announced. "Everyone should gather in the main hall." The colonists assembled, nearly 200 of them now. The original 100 had been joined by new arrivals, and of course, the Mars-born children. Jae-Yun, now 5 years old, stood with the other Mars children at the front of the crowd. The airlock cycled, and 5 members of the Earth Oversight Committee entered the base. Dr. Chen led them, his expression serious as he looked around at the gathered colonists. "Welcome to Mars," Jae-Ho said formally. "We'd like to show you what we've accomplished." Over the next several hours, the committee toured the base. They saw the strengthened radiation shields made from Martian materials. They visited the gardens where Earth plants now grew strong in Martian soil. They examined the solar panels that used TUS to enhance power collection instead of blocking it. In the medical bay, they studied the health records of the Mars-born children. Dr. Chen spent a long time watching them play, noting their easy movements and bright eyes. "Your reports didn't do justice to what you've achieved here," he finally said to Jae-Ho. "We came expecting to find problems. Instead, we found solutions we never imagined." "Mars hasn't just challenged us," Jae-Ho explained. "It's taught us to adapt, to grow stronger. We're not trying to force Earth life to survive here. We're learning to become true Martians." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "The committee's recommendation will be to not only continue the colony, but to expand it. Your advances in adaptation technology, agriculture, and engineering could help humanity settle other worlds too." That evening, the colonists celebrated. Under the stars visible through the garden dome, Earth humans and Mars-born children gathered together. They were no longer just visitors or settlers on an alien world. They were the first citizens of humanity's new home among the stars. Jae-Ho watched Jae-Yun teaching some Earth children how to move efficiently in Mars gravity. "This is just the beginning," he said to his colleagues. "Mars was our first step. Thanks to what we've learned here, the whole solar system is opening up for humanity." As the Martian night fell, the base's lights glowed steadily, a beacon of hope on the red planet's surface. They had done more than just survive on Mars. They had proven that humanity could truly live among the stars.